What's good? What's going on, everybody? This is Kev JB here. I hope everybody's doing fine. As promised, I am here in this particular video to go into the forward of Project 2025, which is also known as the Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. We're going to take our time to look into that so that way we can get some commentary, feedback, any type of discussion that may come up during this conversation. I left the PDF for the Mandate for Leadership Handbook in my last video, which was talking about Project 2025, along with planning ahead. And so I wanted us to go ahead and start looking into this. I know that a lot of us are probably already used to, we're already used to a lot of topics regarding Project 2025 and what it could mean and stuff like that. But I also think that we should be able to look at it together. I don't know if there's anybody who's actually taking their time to go through each of the parts of this whole Project 2025 with their viewers. So I'm hoping that in this conversation, this may be something to go through. Now, I want to try to go through all the authors and stuff, but unfortunately, the list of the people who contributed to this handbook is much too long. So I don't think we're going to be doing anything like that. So I'm going to show myself onto the screen just for a little bit. Hey, you all! Hope all of you all are doing well. It's probably looking a little too dark. I might need to get that light back. Give me just one moment. By the way, if you are here, make sure you get the like button and click the notification bell so that way you are alerted each and every single time there is a new video onto this channel. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this topic of the forward. All right. So now you can see me. I am going to. So what I may do is, if there's anything that comes up, I will probably show my face. But for the most part, I'm going to take my face off so that way that we can be able to focus on the actual writing of this particular project 2025, and we'll go through it together. All right. So without further ado, let's see here. I'm going to take myself off the camera. And we are going to go ahead and go straight into the promise to America. All right. So this is part of the forward of the Project 2025. If you're in here, let me know if you're in here. Make a comment or something. If you're interested in learning about this, you're free to do so. If you want to catch the replay, feel free to do so. Tequila, hey, what's going on? I hope you're doing good. Good afternoon from this side. Actually, I think you're on the same side as me. So good afternoon to you. All right. So without further ado, let me finalize my setup really quickly. I want to make sure that I am able to catch up and follow along with everything that's going on here. Let's see. And I guess while I'm doing that, I could just show my face once more so y'all can be able to see me. As you see, I got my phone here. I just want to make sure that everything is set up so that way that I can properly go through everything in this particular video. I don't want to miss any comments because I have to be able to scroll through while checking in on what's happening with everything. Let me see. By the way, I hope everybody is doing good. Here in Georgia, it's hot. It stays hot like pretty much all the time. All right. So let me go to my. I guess I won't be able to show it here. Let's see. Maybe if I go to my FGP. FGP. All right. Okay. So live. All right. So here we are. That way I am able to follow up. All right. So let's go ahead and get into this particular topic of the forward. All right. So we're going to switch over right over here. All right. So I don't know who has been taking the time to actually read through this particular Project 2025. We're going to actually go through this today, starting with A Promise to America by Kevin D. Roberts, PhD. This is the one who is spearheading this Mandate for Leadership, and he's also part of the Heritage Foundation. So the Heritage Foundation makes this up, but I think the actual person who made this is Paul Dans. All right, so here we go. 44 years ago, the United States and the conservative movements were in dire straits. Both had been betrayed by the Washington establishment and were uncertain whom to trust. Both were internally splintered and strategically adrift. Worse still, at that moment of acute vulnerability and division, we found ourselves besieged by existential adversaries, foreign and domestic. The late 1970s were by a measure of historic low points for America and the political coalition dedicated to preserving its unique legacy of human flourishing and freedom. Today, America and the conservative movement are enduring an era of division and danger akin to the late 1970s. As then, our political class has been discredited by wholesome dishonesty and corruption. Look at America under the ruling and cultural elite today. Inflation is ravaging family budgets, drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading the school libraries. Overseas, a totalitarian communist dictatorship in Beijing is engaged in a strategic, cultural, and economic Cold War against America's interests, values, and people, all while global elites in Washington awaken only slowly to that growing threat. Moreover, low-income communities are drowning in addiction and government dependence. Contemporary elites have even repurposed the worst ingredients of 1970s radical chic to build a totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening. Never heard that before, but okay. I guess it's the first time hearing that for me. Anyway, and now, as then, the Republican Party seems to have little understanding about what to do. Most alarming of all, the very moral foundations for our society are in peril. Yet students of history will note that notwithstanding all those challenges, the late 1970s proved to be the moment when the political right unified itself and the country and led the United States to historic political, economic, and global victory. The Heritage Foundation is proud to have played a small but pivotal role in that story. It was in early 1979, amidst stagflation, gaslighting, and Red Army invasion of Afghanistan, the nadir of Jimmy Carter's days of malaise, that Heritage launched the Mandate for Leadership project. So this right here is what I was talking about earlier about how the whole idea. Let me see if I can get myself back onto the screen. This right here is exactly what I was talking about when we were saying how the Heritage Foundation created the Mandate for Leadership a long time ago. It's way before Trump, and this was even during that time of what they were seeing as a major issue caused by the left from Democrats with Jimmy Carter. All right, so let's go on. Let me get back to it. We're gonna continue from there. I just wanted to say that really quickly because I think so much everybody's focused more on Trump and not recognizing just how long or how old this Mandate for Leadership actually is. So let me get back to it. Let's see. We brought together hundreds of conservative scholars and academics across the conservative movement. Together, this team created 20-volume, 3,000-page governing handbook containing more than 2,000 conservative policies to reform the federal government and rescue the American people from Washington dysfunction. It was a promise from the conservative movement to the country, confident, specific, and clear. Mandate for Leadership was published in 1981, the same month Ronald Reagan was sworn into his presidency. By the end of that year, more than 60% of its recommendations had become policy, and Reagan was on his way to ending stagflation, reviving American confidence and prosperity, and winning the Cold War. So, should I give commentary? Well, let me continue. Let me go ahead and continue. So the bad news today is that our political establishment and cultural elite have once again driven America towards decline. The good news is that we know that the way out, even though the challenges today are not what they were in the 1970s. Conservatives should be confident that we can rescue our kids, reclaim our culture, revive our economy, and defeat the anti-American left at home and abroad. We did it before, and we will do it again. As Ronald Reagan put it, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation. This is the duty history has put before us, and by the standards by which our generation of conservatives will be judged. And we should not want it any other way. The legacy of mandate for leadership, and indeed of the entire Reagan revolution, is that if conservatives want to save the country, we need a bold and courageous plan. This book is the first step in that plan. So again, this is what I was saying before about this is really, in this modern time, it is the mandate for leadership 2.0, because much of what they're talking about is pretty much in the spirit of Ronald Reagan. All right. So it is really that old. Again, I know when we're talking about the whole idea of Project 2025, we only look at it from the standpoint of the reign of Trump. But this is something that is a whole lot more than that. This is something that actually has it has a longevity to it. Okay. Let me get off of that and continue on with the reading. So this book is the first step to the plan. The Conservative Promise. This volume, The Conservative Promise, is the open salvo of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, launched by the Heritage Foundation and our many partners in April 2022. It's 30 chapters, laid out hundreds of clear and concrete policies, recommendations for White House offices, cabinet departments, Congress, and agencies, commissions, and boards. Just as important as the scope of the Conservative Promise recommendations is the breadth of its authorship. This book is the product of more than 400 scholars and policy experts from across the conservative movement and across the country. Contributors include former elected officials, world-renowned economists, and veterans from 4 presidential administrations. This is an agenda prepared by and for conservatives who will be ready on day one of the next administration to save our country from the brink of disaster. The Heritage Foundation is once again facilitating this work, but as our dozens of partners and hundreds of authors will attest, this book is the work of the entire conservative movement. As such, the authors express consensus recommendations already forged, especially along 4 broad fronts that will decide America's future. 1, restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. 2, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. 3, defend our nation, sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. 4, secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. What makes these 4 pieces of the Conservative Promise so valuable to the next president is that they cut through superficial distractions and focus on the more more and foundational challenges America faced in this moment of history. This was one of the secrets of conservative success in the Reagan era, one our generation should emulate. As in the late 1970s, Americans today experience the failures of political and cultural elites in countless ways. In the job market and in the grocery store checkout lines, on the streets and in our schools, in the media and within our institutions. But in truth, these daily dysfunctions are not innumerable problems, but innumerable manifestations of a few core crises. In 1979, the threats we faced were the Soviet Union, the socialism of 1970s liberals, and the predatory deviancy of cultural elites. Reagan defeated these beasts by ignoring their tentacles and striking instead at their hearts. Defeated these beasts. Okay. Um, his approach to the Cold War: we win and they lose. His economic agenda: the human dignity of work and its many rewards. His platform in the cultural wars: the community of values embodied in these words: family, work, neighborhood, peace, and freedom. Okay. This book and Project 2025 as a whole will arm the next conservative president with the same kind of strategic clarity, but for a new age. Okay. So before continuing further, there's one thing that is really standing out to me. It's like it's very clear that they are very focused on having the conservative person be the one that saves the nation. Almost kind of at the exclusion of everyone else who is not conservative. This is what it seemed to be held as this ideal American hero, the the one true conservative, or the one conservative person, president, or system that is going to save the entire nation. So it's something that they've done before during the Reagan era, and that they plan to do again by making sure they have a conservative president. In this case, it would be Trump, to be in place for such a thing to happen again. Now, there are things that are different now compared to back then, including this immunity thing with the presidency. But this is the thing that they are pushing for. And I got to say, like I said before, this is something that they have been organizing and planning for what seems like a while. It's apparently they consider this is a grassroots effort, and they're using the mandate for leadership as this blueprint to restore law and order within back to America. In fact, I think it was Donald Trump who even said that when it comes to the Republicans and the Conservative Party, they are considered the party of law and order. This was even said during the January 6th insurrection when he made that tweet. So this is them putting law and order as conservatives to the American government and the populace in policy. Okay, so let's continue on with promise number 1. Restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. The next conservative president must get to work pursuing the true priority of politics, the well-being of the American family. In many ways, the entire point of centralizing political power is to subvert the family. Its purpose is to replace people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural. You see this in the popular left-wing aphorism, government is simply the name we give to the things we choose to do together. But in real life, most of the things people do together have nothing to do with government. These are the mediated institutions that serve as the building blocks of any healthy society: marriage, family, work, church, school, volunteering. The name real people give to the things we do together is community, not government. Our lives are full of interwoven, overlapping communities, and our individual and collective happiness depends on them. But the most important community in each of our lives and in the life of the nation is the family. Today, the American family is in crisis. 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers, including more than 70% of Black children. There is no government program that can replace the hole in a child's soul cut out by the absence of a father. Fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide, substance abuse, rejection of the church, and high school dropouts. So many other problems government programs are designed to solve but can't are ultimately problems created by the crisis of marriage and the family. The world has never seen a thriving, healthy, free, and prosperous society where most children grow up without their married parents. If current trends continue, we are heading towards social implosion. Furthermore, the next conservative president must understand that using government alone to respond to symptoms of the family crisis is a dead end. Federal power must instead be wielded to reverse the crisis and rescue American kids from familial breakdown. The conservative promise includes dozens of specific policies to accomplish this existential task. Some are obvious and long-standing goals, like eliminating marriage penalties in federal welfare programs and the tax code, and install working requirements for food stamps. But we must go further. It's time for policymakers to elevate family authority, formation, and cohesion as their top priority, and even use government power, including through the tax code, to restore the American family. Today, the left is threatening the tax-exempt status of church and charities that reject woke progressivism. They will soon turn to Christian schools and clubs with the next totalitarian intent. The next conservative president must make the institution of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive rights, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. Pornography manifests today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian knot intricately binding up disparate claims about freedom, about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. My tongue is getting tired reading this stuff. It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynist exploiters of women. Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be in prison. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. In our schools, the question of parental authority over the children's education is a simple one. Schools serve the parents, not the other way around. That is, of course, the best argument for universal school choice, a goal all conservatives and conservative presidents must pursue. But even before we achieve that long-term goal, parents' rights as the children's primary educators should be non-negotiable in American schools. States, cities, counties, school boards, union bosses, principals, and teachers who disagree to be immediately cut off from federal funds. The noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country. These theories poison our children who are being taught, on the one hand, to affirm the color of their skin fundamentally determines their identity and even the moral status, while on the other, they are taught to deny the very creaturelessness that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the givenness of our nature as men or women. Allowing parents or physicians to reassign the sex of a minor is child abuse and must end. For public institutions to use tax dollars to declare the superiority or inferiority of certain races, sects, and religions is a violation of the Constitution and civil rights law and cannot be tolerated by any government anywhere in the country. But the pro-family promises expressed in this book and central to the next conservative president's agenda, must go much further than the traditional, narrow, defined family issues. Family definition of family issues. Every threat to family stability must be confronted. This resolve should color each of our policies. Consider our approach to big tech. The worst of these companies prey on children, like drug dealers, to get them addicted to their mobile apps. Many Silicon Valley executives famously don't let their own kids have smartphones. They nevertheless make billions of dollars addicting other people's children to theirs. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms are specifically designed to create the digital dependencies that fuel mental illness and anxiety, to fray children's bonds with their parents and siblings. Federal policy cannot allow this industrial scale child abuse to continue. Finally, conservatives should gratefully celebrate the greatest pro-family win in a generation, overturning Roe v. Wade, a decision that for 5 decades made a mockery of our Constitution and facilitated the deaths of tens of millions of unborn children. But the Dobbs decision is just the beginning. Conservatives in the states and in Washington, including the next conservative administration, should push as hard as possible to protect the unborn in every jurisdiction in America. In particular, the next conservative president should work with Congress to enact the most robust protections for the unborn that Congress will support while deploying existing federal powers to protect innocent life and vigorously complying with statutory bans of the federal funding of abortion. Conservatives should ardently pursue these pro-life and pro-family policies while recognizing that the many women who find themselves in immense difficult and often tragic situations and the heroism of every choice to become a mother. Alternatives to abortion, especially adoption, should receive federal and state support. In summary, the next president has a moral responsibility to lead the nation in restoring a culture of life in America again. All right? So that's promise number 1. Here's promise number 2. Dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Of course, the surest way to put the federal government back to work for the American people is to reduce its size and scope back to something resembling the original constitutional intent. Conservatives desire a smaller government, not for its own sake, but for the sake of human flourishing. But Washington establishment doesn't want a constitutionally limited government because it means they lose power and are held more accountable by the people who put them in power. Like restoring popular sovereignty, the task of reattaching the federal government's constitutional and democratic tethers calls to mind Ronald Reagan's observation that there are no easy answers, but there are simple answers. In the case of making the federal government smaller, more effective, and accountable, the simple answer is the Constitution itself. The surest proof is how strenuous and creatively generations of progressives and many Republican leaders and many Republican insiders have worked to cut themselves free from the strictures of the 1789 Constitution and subsequent amendment. Consider the federal budget. Under current law, Congress is required to pass a budget and 12 issue-specific spending bills comporting with it every single year. The last time Congress did so was in 1996. Wow. Congress no longer meaningfully budgets, authorizes, or categorizes spending. Continuing on. Instead, party leaders negotiate one multi-trillion-dollar spending bill, several thousand pages long, and then vote on it before anyone literally has a chance to read it. Debate time is restricted, amendments are prohibited, and all of this is backed up in a midnight deadline when the previous omnibus spending bill will run out and the federal government shuts down. So I'm going to pause here because I just got a comment. Tiff, how's it going? I've been looking for someone to read this. I appreciate Kevin listening while at work. You're welcome, Tiff. I know you and we have kind of like some similar thoughts about some of these things. So I really appreciate you being here. All right, so let's continue on. This process is not designed to empower 330 million American citizens and their elected representatives, but rather to empower the party elites, secretly negotiating without any public scrutiny or oversight. In the end, congressional leaders' behaviors and incentives here are no different from those of global elites insulating policy decisions over the climate, trade, public health, you name it, from the sovereignty of national electorates. Public scrutiny and democratic accountability makes life harder for policymakers, so they skirt it. It's not dysfunction, it's corruption. I can definitely understand that. And despite its gaudy price tag, the federal budget is not even close to the worst example of this corruption. That distinction belongs to the administrative state, the dismantling of which must be a top priority for the next conservative president. I guess they skipped over the B part. But it must be a top priority for the next conservative president. The term administrative state refers to the policymaking work done by the bureaucracies of all federal government departments, agencies, and millions of employees. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. That is, federal law is enacted only by elected legislators in both houses of Congress. This executive authority was part of the framers' doctrine of separated powers. They not only split the federal government's legislative, executive, and judicial branches into different branches, they also gave each branches checks over the others. Under our Constitution, the legislative branch, Congress, is far and away the most powerful and correspondingly the most accountable to the people. In recent decades, members of the House and Senate discovered that if they give away that power to the second article branch of government, they can also deny responsibility for its actions. So today in Washington, most policies is no longer set by Congress at all, but by the administrative state. Given the choice between being powerful but vulnerable or irrelevant but famous, most members of Congress have chosen the latter. Congress passes intentionally vague laws that delegate power making over a given issue to a federal agency. That agent's bureaucrats, not just elected but seemingly unfireable, then leap at the chance to fill the vacuum created by Congress' creating cowardice. The federal government is growing larger and less constitutionally accountable, even to the president, every year. The first bullet here says, a combination of elected and unelected bureaucrats at the Environmental Protection Agency quietly strangles the domestic energy production through difficult to understand rulemaking processes. Bureaucrats at the Department of Homeland Security, following the lead of a feckless administration, order border and immigration enforcement agencies to help migrate criminally enter our government with impunity. Third, bureaucrats at the Department of Education inject racist, anti-American, ahistorical propaganda into American classrooms. Fourth, bureaucrats at the Department of Justice force school districts to undermine girls' sports and parents' rights to satisfy transgender extremists. 5, woke bureaucrats at the Pentagon force troops to attend training seminars about white privilege. And 6, bureaucrats at the State Department infuse U.S. foreign aid programs with woke extremism about intersectionality and abortion. Unaccountable federal spending is the secret lifeblood of the Great Awakening. Nearly every power center held by the left is funded or supported one way or another through the bureaucracy of Congress. Colleges and school districts are funded by tax dollars. The administrative state holds 100% of its power at the sufferance of Congress, and its insulation from presidential discipline is a constitutional fairy tale spun by the Washington establishment to protect its turf. Members of Congress shield themselves from constitutional responsibility, often when the White House allows them to get away with it. Cultural institutions like public libraries and public health agencies are only as independent from public accountability as elected officials and voters permit. Let's be clear. The most egregious regulations promulgated by the current administration come from one place, the Oval Office. The president cannot hide behind the agencies, as his many executive orders make clear. His is the responsibility for the regulations that threaten American communities, schools, and families. A conservative president must move swiftly to do away with these vast abuses of presidential power, and remove the career of political bureaucrats who fuel it. Properly considered, restoring fiscal limits and constitutional accountability to the federal government is a continuation of restoring national sovereignty to the people. In foreign affairs, global strategies, federal budgeting, and policymaking, the same pattern emerges again and again. Ruling elites slash and tear at restrictions and accountability placed on them. They centralize power up and away from the American people, from supra treaties and organizations to left-wing experts who cite unseen all or nothing legislating to the unelected career bureaucrats of the administrative state. As monolithic as the left institutional power appears to be, it originates with appropriations from Congress and is made complete by a feckless president. A conservative president must look at the legislative branch for decisive action. The administrative state is not going anywhere until Congress acts to retrieve its own power from bureaucrats and the White House. But in the meantime, there are many executive tools a courageous conservative president can use to handcuff the bureaucracy, push Congress to return to its constitutional responsibility, restore power over Washington to the American people, bring the administrative state to heel, and in the process, defang and defund the woke culture warriors who have infiltrated every last institution in America. The conservative promise lays out how to use many of these tools, including how to fire supposedly unfireable federal bureaucrats, how to shutter wasteful and corrupt bureaus in office, how to muzzle woke propaganda at every level of government, how to restore the American people's constitutional authority over the administrative state, and how to save untold taxpayer dollars in the process. Finally, the president can restore public confidence and accountability to our most important government function of all, national defense. The American people desire a military full of highly skilled servicemen and women who can protect the homeland and our interests overseas. The next conservative president must end the left's social experimentation with the military, restore war fighting as its sole mission, and set defeating the threat of Chinese Communist Party as its highest priority. The next conservative president must possess the courage to relentlessly put the interests of the everyday American over the desires of the ruling elite. Their outrage cannot be prevented. It must simply be ignored, and it can be. The left derives its power from the institutions they control, but those institutions are only powerful to the extent that constitutional officers surrender their own legitimate authority to them. A president who refuses to do so and uses his or her office to reimpose constitutional authority over federal policymaking can begin to correct decades of corruption and remove thousands of bureaucrats from the position of public trust they have so long abused. All right? So that one was number 2. All right, so we're halfway down, you guys. Now we're going to get to promise number 3. defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Okay, I have to get to him later. Got somebody sending me a message. I have to get to him later. All right, promise number 3. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. The United States belongs to we the people. All government authority derives from the consent of the people, and our nation's success derives from the character of its people. The American people's right to rule ourselves is the obverse of our duty. We cannot outsource to each other our obligation to ensure the conditions that allow our families, local communities, churches, and synagogues, and neighborhoods to thrive. The buck stops with each of us. So each of us must have the freedom to pursue the good for ourselves and those entrusted to our care. To most Americans, this is common sense. But in Washington, D.C., and other centers of left power like the media and the academy, this statement of basic civics is branded hate speech. Progressive elites speak in lofty terms of openness, progress, expertise, cooperation, and globalization. But too often, these terms are just rhetorical Trojan horses concealing their true intentions, stripping we the people of our constitutional authority over our country's future. America's corporate and political elites do not believe in the ideals to which our nation is dedicated: self-governance, the rule of law, and ordered liberty. They certainly do not trust the American people, and they disdain the Constitution's restrictions on their ambitions. Instead, they believe in a kind of 21st century Wilsonian order in which the enlightened, highly educated managerial elites run things rather than the humble, patriotic working families who make up the majority of what the elites contemptuously call flyover country. This Wilsonian hubris, it has spread like a cancer through many of America's largest corporations, its public institutions, and its popular, sorry about that, and its popular culture. Those who run our so-called American corporations have bent to the will of the woke agenda and care more for their foreign investors and organizations than their American workers and customers. Today, nearly every top-tier U.S. president, university president, or Wall Street hedge fund manager has more in common with the socialist European head of state than with the parents at a high school football in Waco, Texas. Wow. Whew. Many elites, a lot of stuff's a mouthful. Wow. Many elites' entire identity, it seems, is wrapped up in their sense of superiority over those people. But under our Constitution, they are the mere equals of the workers who shower after work instead of before. This is as it should and must be. Intellectual sophistication, advanced degrees, financial success, and all other markers of elite status have no bearing on a person's knowledge of the one thing most necessary for governance: what it means to live well. That knowledge is available to each of us, no matter how humble our backgrounds or how unpretentious our attainments. It is open to us to read in the book of human nature, to which we are all offered the key just by merit of our shared humanity. One of the great premises of American political life is that everyone who can read in that book must have a voice in deciding the course and fate of our republic. Progressive policymakers and pundits in America either fail to understand this premise or intentionally reject it. They enthusiastically support supranational organizations like the United Nations and the European European Union, which are run and staffed almost entirely by people who share their values and are mostly insulated from the influence of national elections. That is why they are eager for America to sign international treaties on everything from pharmaceutical patents to climate change and to the rights of the child. And why those treaties invariably endorse policies that could never pass through the U.S. Congress. Like the progressive Woodrow Wilson a century ago, the woke left today sees a world bound by global treaties they write, in which they exercise dictatorial powers over all nations without being subject to democratic accountability. That's why today's progressive left so cavalierly supports open borders despite the lawless humanitarian crisis their policy creates along America's southern border. They seek to purge the very concept of the nation state from the American ethos, no matter how much crime increases or resources drop for schools and hospitals or wages decrease from the working class. Open borders activism is a classic example of what the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer called cheap grace, public promoting one's own virtue without risking any personal inconvenience. Indeed, the only direct impact of open borders on pro-open borders elite is that the constant flow of illegal immigration suppresses the wages of their housekeepers, landscapers, and busboys. Cheap grace aptly describes the left's love affair with environmental extremism. Those who suffer most from the policies environmentalism would have us enact are the aged, poor, and vulnerable. This is not a political cause, but a pseudo-religion meant to baptize liberal, ruthless pursuit of power in the holy water of environmental virtue. Oh, that's interesting, kind of extreme, especially when you know climate change really is a factor in a lot of these things. But let's continue. And so I think it's very interesting too. Are they basically naming climate change as environmental extremism? Interesting. At its very heart, environmental extremism is decidedly anti-human. Stewardship and conservation are supplanted by population control and economic regression. Environmental ideologues would ban the fuels that run almost all the world's cars, planes, factories, farms, and electric grids. Abandoning confidence in human resilience and creativity in responding to the challenges of the world would raise impediments to the most meaningful human activities. They would stand human affairs on their heads regarding human activity itself as fundamentally a threat to be sacrificed to the God of nature. Interesting. This is some really interesting. I mean, I keep in mind I have read this before, but I've never read it to the extent where they have actually talked about environmentalism in this regard. So it kind of has me wondering, like, do they see these topics of like climate change, climate issues as being too extreme in environmentalism? Like they're just kind of going on and on about, it's very interesting, very strange to me. But let's continue. But before I continue, let me just add on to that. I know that very recently I was reading in the news that Mexico City was running low on water and they could be running out of water probably within, well, at that time it was done in February, so they said it could be running out of water in a matter of months. So at this point now it could be a matter of weeks. So are they saying that too is a part of extremism and environmental? That I don't know. It's very interesting because the stuff is happening, even when it comes to the heat that's in the air and stuff. But whatever. Let me go back. Let me just keep on going. The same goals are the heart of elite support for economic globalization. For 30 years, America's political, economic, and cultural leaders embraced and enriched communist China and its genocidal Communist Party while hollowing out America's industrial base. What may have started with good intentions has now been made clear. Unfettered trade with China has been a catastrophe. It has made a handful of American corporations enormously profitable while twisting their business incentives away from the American people's needs. For a generation, politicians of both parties promised that engagement with Beijing would grow our economy while injecting American values into China. The opposite has happened. American factories have closed. Jobs have been outsourced. Our manufacturing economies have been financialized. And all along, the corporations profiting failed to export our values of human rights and freedom. Rather, they imported China's anti-American values into their C-suite. Even before the rise of big tech, Wall Street ignored China's serial theft of American intellectual property. It outright cheered the elimination of American manufacturing jobs. Learn to code, they were glowed. These were just the price of progress. Engagement was at every step Beijing's project, not America. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, dictated terms only to break them whenever it suited them. They stole our technology, spied on our people, and threatened our allies, all with trillions of dollars in wealth and military power financed by their access to our market. Then came the rise of big tech, which is now less a contributor to the US economy rather than it is a tool of China's government. In exchange for cheap labor and regulatory special treatment from Beijing, America's largest technology firms funnel data about America to the CCP. They hand over sensitive intellectual properties with military and intelligence applications to keep the money rolling in. They let Beijing censor Chinese users on their platform. They let the CCP set their corporate policies about mobile apps, and they run interference for our rival political priorities in Washington. One side of big tech companies' business model is old-fashioned American competitiveness and world-changing technological innovation. But increasingly, that side of these businesses is overshadowed by their roles as operatives in the lucrative employ of America's most dangerous international enemy. If you want to understand the danger posed by collaboration between big tech and the CCP, look no further than TikTok. The highlighted the video app used by 80 million Americans every month, overwhelmingly popular among teenage girls, is in effect a tool of Chinese espionage. The tie between TikTok and Chinese governments are not loose, and they're not coincidental. The same can be observed of many U.S. colleges and universities. Through the CCP's Confucius Institute, Beijing has been just as successful at compromising and co-opting our higher education system as they have at compromising and co-opting corporate America. A casual reader might take the last few pages as surveying a broad array of challenges facing the American people and the next conservative president. Supranational policymaking, border security, globalization, engagement with China, manufacturing, big tech, and Beijing compromised colleges. But these are not many issues, but two. One, that China is a totalitarian enemy of the United States, not a strategic partner or fair competitor. And two, that America's elites have betrayed the American people. The solution to all the above problems is not to tinker with this or that government program, to replace this or that bureaucrat. These are problems not of technocracy, efficiency, but of national sovereignty and constitutional government. We solve them by not trimming and reshaping the leaves, but by ripping out the trees, root and branch. International organizations and agreements that erode our Constitution, rule of law, or popular sovereignty should not be reformed. They should be abandoned. Illegal immigration should be ended, not mitigated. The border sealed, not reprioritized. Economic engagement with China should be ended, not rethought. Our manufacturing and industrial base should be restored, not allowed to deteriorate further. Confucius Institutes, TikTok, and any arm of Chinese propaganda and espionage should be outlawed, not merely monitored. Universities taking money from the CCP should lose their accreditations, charters, and eligibility for federal funds. The next conservative president should go beyond merely defending America's energy interests, but go on offense, asserting them around the world. America's vast reserves of oil and natural gases are not an environmental problem. They are the lifeblood of economic growth. American dominance of the global energy market would be a good thing for the world, and most importantly, for we the people. It's not just about the jobs, even though unleashing domestic energy production would create millions of them. It's not just about higher wages for workers who didn't go to college, though they would receive raises they have missed out on for 2 generations. Full spectrum strategic energy dominance will facilitate the reinvigoration of American entire industrial and manufacturing sector as we disentangle our economy from China. Globally, this will rebalance power away from dangerous regimes in Russia and the Middle East. It will build powerful allies with fast growing nations in Africa and provide the leverage to counter Chinese ambitions in South America and the Pacific. Locally, it will drive billions of dollars of private investments to the communities that have been hampered by globalization since the 1990s. And it will clarify our intentions to Beijing that the next president can ensure that a large part of America's reindustrialization is in the production of the equipment we will need to dissuade future foreign meddling with U.S. vital interests. All right. So we're at the last one. I hope everybody's getting through this. I hope you guys are able to enjoy my reading and commentary. I know I know that I have been kind of tripping over words here and there. There's a lot of words. This thing is kind of verbose, but I think that's all part of the process of creating a political handbook such as the Mandate for Leadership. But I hope you all have been enjoying so far as we continue on to the last promise on this Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. All right. So let's get to it. We're almost done. So the next one we're reading is promise number 4, securing our God-given individual right to enjoy the blessings of liberty. The Declaration of Independence famously asserted the belief of America's founders that all men are created equal and endowed with God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the pursuit of happiness, that is central to America's heroic experiment in self-government. When the founders spoke of pursuit of happiness, what they meant might be understood today as, in essence, pursuit of blessedness. That is, an individual must be free to live as his creator ordained, to flourish. And our Constitution grants each of us the liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. This pursuit of the good life is found primarily in families, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners, and the like. Many find happiness through their work. Think of dedicated teachers or healthcare professionals entrepreneurs or plumbers throwing themselves into their businesses. Anyone who sees a job well done as a personal reward. Religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Still, others find themselves happiest when they are happiest in their local voluntary community of friends, their neighbors, their civic or charitable work. The American Republic was founded on principles prioritizing and maximizing individual rights to live their best life or to enjoy what the framers called the blessings of liberty. It's this radical equality, liberty for all, not just of rights, but of authority, that the rich and powerful have hated about our democracy in America since 1776. They resented America's audacity in insisting that we don't need them to tell us how to live. It's in this inalienable right of self-direction of each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself at his or her community to the good that the ruling class disdain. With the Declaration and Constitution, the nation's founders handed to us the means with which to preserve this right. Abraham Lincoln wrote of the Declaration as an apple of gold in a silver frame, the Constitution. So must the next conservative president look to these documents when the elite mount their next assault on liberty. Left to our own devices, the American people rejected European monarchy and colonialism just as we rejected slavery, second class citizenship for women, mercantilism, socialism, Wilsonian globalism, fascism, communism, and today, wokeism. To the left, these assertions of patriotic self assurance are just so many signs of our moral depravity and intellectual inferiority, proof that, in fact, we need a ruling elite making decisions for us. But the next conservative president should be proud, not ashamed of America's unique culture of social equality and ordered liberty. After all, the countries where Marxist elites have won political and economic power are all weaker, poorer, and less free for it. To that previous line that I saw talking about the elite class making decisions for us, I got more on that, but I'll save that for the end of this conversation. The United States remains the most innovative and upwardly mobile society in the world. Government should stop trying to substitute its own preferences for those of the people. And the next conservative president should champion the dynamic genius of free enterprise against the grim miseries of elite directed socialism. The promise of socialism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, fascism, whichever name it chooses, is simple. Government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes for all people. The problem is that it has never been done so. There is no such thing as the government. There are just people who work for the government and wield its power and who, at almost every opportunity, wield it to serve themselves first and everyone else a distant second. This is not a failing of one nation or a socialist party, but inherent in human nature. Nighttime satellite images of Korean Peninsula famously showed that the free market South lit up with homes, businesses, cities electrified from coast to coast. By contrast, communist North Korea is almost completely dark, except for the small dot of the capital city, Pyongyang. Pyongyang. Okay, I'll put it that way. Pyongyang. I'm not used to saying that word. Where a psychotic dictator and his cronies live. The same phenomenon is on display in the infuriating fact that 4 of our 6 richest counties in the United States are the suburbs of Washington, a city infamous for its lack of native protective industries. We see the same corruption expressed on an individual level whenever billionaire climate activists who want to outlaw carbon fuel transportation fly to A-list conferences on their private jets. Or when COVID-19 shut down politicians like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and California Governor Gavin Newsom were caught at the hair salon or dining at fancy restaurants after moralizing about how everyone must stay at home and forego such luxuries during the pandemic. For socialists who are almost always well-to-do, socialism is not a means of equalizing outcomes, but a means of accumulating power. They never get around to helping anyone else. The Soviet Empire was a social and economic failure. North Korea, despite the opulence of its tyrants, is one of the poorest nations in the world. Cuba is so corrupt that its people regularly risk their lives to escape to Florida on rafts. Venezuela was once the richest nation in South America. Today, a decade after a Marxist dictator took over, 94% of Venezuelans live in poverty while they try to immigrate over here. Even socialist Senator Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont was forced to repeal the state's single-payer health care system just 3 years after creating it. Oh, hold on. Let me get this real quick. There's a comment on here. Hi, Renaissance woman. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well today. All right. In every case, socialist elites promised that if they only direct the economy, everything would be better. Very quickly, everything got worse. In socialist nations after socialist nations, the only way government could keep its disgruntled people in line was to surveil and terrorize them. By contrast, in countries with a high degree of economic freedom, elites are not in charge because everyone is in charge. People work, build, invest, save, and create according to their own interests and in service to the common good of their fellow citizens. There is a reason why the private economy hews to the maximum, the customer is always right, while government bureaucracies are notoriously user unfriendly, just as there is a reason why private charities are cheerful and government welfare systems are not. It's not because grocery store clerks and PTA moms are good and federal bureaucracies are bad. It's because private enterprises, for-profit and or nonprofit, must cooperate to give to succeed. So as the American people take back their sovereignty, constitutional authority, respect for their families and communities, they should also take back their right to pursue the good life. The next president should promote the pro-growth economic policies that spur new jobs and investment, higher wages, and productivity. Yes, that agenda should include overdue tax and regulatory reform, but it should go further and include antitrust enforcement against corporate monopolies. This should promote educational opportunities outside the woke dominated system of public schools and universities, including trade schools, apprentice programs, and the student loan alternatives that fund student streams Marxist academics. Just as important as expanding the opportunities for workers and small businesses, the next president should crack down on the crony capitalist corruption that enables America's large corporations to profit through political influence rather than competitive enterprise and customer satisfaction. Analogous pro-growth reforms for America's voluntary civil societies are also in order. America is not an economy, it is a country. Economic freedom is not the only important freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the freedom to assemble also represent key components of the American promise. Today, in addition to the problem of big tech censorship, we see speakers at universities shouted down, parents investigated and arrested for attempting to speak at school board meetings, and donors to conservative causes harassed and intimidated. The next conservative president must defend our First Amendment rights. Best efforts. Ultimately, the left does not believe all men are created equal. They think they are special. They certainly don't think all people should have unalienable right to pursue the good life. They think only they themselves have such a right, along with a moral responsibility to make decisions for everyone. They don't think any citizen, state, business, or church or charity should be allowed any freedom until they first bend the knee. This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke cultural warriors. Our movement has not been united in recent years, and our country has paid the price. In the past decade, though, the breakdown of the family, the rise of China, the Great Awakening, big tech abuses, and the erosion of constitutional accountability in Washington have rendered these divisions not just inconvenient, but politically suicidal. Every hour, the left directs federal policies and elite institutions. Our sovereignty, our Constitution, our families, and our freedoms are a step closer to disappearing. Conservatives just have 2 years and one shot to get this right. With enemies at home and abroad, there is no margin for error. Time is running short. If we fail, the fight for the very idea of America may be lost. But we should take this small window of opportunity we have left to act with courage and confidence, not despair. The last time our nation and movement were so near defeat, we rallied together behind a great leader and great ideas, transcended our differences, rescued our nation, and changed the world. It's time to do that again. Time to do it again. Now, as then, we know who we are fighting and what we are fighting for our republic, our freedom, and for each other. The next conservative president will enter office on January 20th, 2025, with a simple choice: greatness or failure. It will be a daunting task, but no more so than every generation of Americans has faced and passed. The conservative promise represents the best effort of conservative movement in 2023 and the next conservative president last opportunity to save our republic. All right. So that officially concludes our topic on, or at least the forward of our of this reading. So I hope you all were able to gather some stuff. I do not know who has been taking the opportunity to read this for yourself. I posted like I said before, I posted the link to the PDF into my last video, which was talking about planning ahead in Project 2025. If you want, you can look at that video and be able to look at that. There's one thing I wanted to say. There was something that was said here that I wanted to point to in regard to our choices. Let me see if I can get back up and read it. I already took the thing down. See. I hope I got it. Okay, I think I'm gonna say I make them on the page. Let's see. Oh well, I'll just be able to say it because I can't get into my head. I can't find it right now. But the idea of choice. I think that one of the greatest things, I think even just reading here and just kind of seeing how people are reacting with Project 2025 from the Republican to the Democratic side, I think it's very, very important to recognize that you have the power of choice. I think people are so focused on what the parties are doing that I don't think we're really paying attention to how much power we are giving away by allowing everything to feel as if it's making the choice for us. Let me bring myself onto the screen here so that way that y'all can see me. Hey y'all, what's up? I think that there is so much of a focus on what everybody else is doing. Like you see people scrambling just to try to, get Project 2025 away, not work and stuff like that. But I want us all to remember something very, very important. When it comes to we the people, whether it's with the Republicans, whatever, or the independents or Democrats, whatever, always remember that you are the one that has the power. I think I said this before in the last video, but I'm going to say it again. You are the ones that have the power. Even with I think it's I appreciate their attempt with trying to bring things back into power. I just really hope that in the long run, they don't become a problem in themselves trying to achieve this goal. So far, everything is all about the conservative movement. There's also, to me, there's so much of a push to try to get away from wokeism that I don't think they may be aware of how tone deaf they may be to people who may not fit the classic ideal American view. I do have concerns about that just looking at the forward. I also have concerns about how they view the environmentalism and the whole idea of climate change and how that plays a huge role and impact, especially when it comes to countries across the world, and how that plays a role with why people are coming over here and things like that. It's not necessarily an excuse for crossing over illegally, but it does play a role, something that I've noticed. I recently found out about Mexico City and the fact that they are running out of water, right? They've been running out of water. I think they only have like weeks left until it's completely gone. So I want to encourage you all again. Whatever happens, you are the ones that have the power. No matter what type of manifesto or whatever type of policy that comes about with any of these parties, you are the one that decides whether or not this is something that is to be. You have more control of that than you may recognize. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, especially as people are panicking and frantic about what Project 25 is, what's going to be, and things like that, part of the reason why I put this Project 25 as part of the reading is so that you guys are aware of it, so that way you're not afraid of it. Many people are not even, I'm not even sure that there's a lot of people who have really taken the time to read everything. They are just kind of highlighting up some stuff they feel is problematic. But I think once you have an idea of what it's about, and I'm taking my time to read more and more of it. I'm going to be reading chapter 1. Chapter 1 to me, I've kind of already see as, not sure about the method there, just from reading it at the beginning. But you really got to take your time to really understand your power and your worth. You're not just simply a voter. You are the one that powers everything, no matter what happens from the Democrat or the Republican side. I think the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is that the Republicans are really taking their time to truly listen to their base, to the point to where they made this this handbook. I don't know if that's the case for the Democrats in totality, but in any case, they have to follow you as the people. All right, whether you are the one that powers everything, or whether they need you to be in power, need you to power things so that they can stay in power. Everything falls on you. To take the responsibility necessary to make sure that you know as much as possible, the way you can make informed decisions about what you need to do for this upcoming election, and even more importantly, have foresight about what things would be like after the election. One of the things that Project 2025 is showing me, just from looking at the forward, is how much foresight that they are having for the future, and how much organization has been put into place just to ensure that this thing could come into existence. This has been in the works for quite some time, and I'm encouraging each of you, as I've taken the time to read through this, not only to just look at what they are doing, but also see where you stand on things, so that you can be prepared for what your power should be as a citizen of the democracy of we the people. Republic really is supposed to be the ideal is supposed to be a constitutional republic, but even from the standpoint of a democracy, know where you stand. All right. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the forward. I don't know when I'm going to do the first chapter, but I'm sure that I'm going to be doing that sometime soon. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful day. I managed to get through this in 1 hour and 17 minutes. So that was good. I hope that the other chapters will be just as good. All right. So to Tequila, to Tiff, to Renaissance Woman, thank you so much. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. To anyone else that will be coming in, make sure that you hit the like button and click the notification bell, so that way you are alerted for more videos. Even though we're talking about Project 2025, my focal point is to ensure that you are living up to your purpose with humanity and identity and things like that. That's the main focal point of the channel, and we're using Project 2025 to not only talk about the idea of the plan, but also ensuring that you are setting yourself up to be empowered to make the decisions possible for yourself, with having the knowledge, the full knowledge of what's inside. All right. So I'll let you guys go. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Catch you all later.